Well, in the second part of the dialogue, I suppose, is really his interrogation of Miletus, which you can read for yourself. He obviously tries to show that Miletus is full of it, that none of the charges really make any sense, and he has specific reasons for showing why they don't make any sense. But I thought that one of the things I wanted to emphasize, or failed to emphasize in the last talk, was what are the actual charges against him. Remember, there are the actual charges. He's in a court. There are specific charges that have been made against him. But then there are these former accusers, which he has basically invented. The accusation of long-standing public opinion. And it's interesting to compare those two charges. The first set of charges uh, he says are basically the charges that are made, or the accusations, or the prejudices against all philosophers. Um, find it here, yes. Says they repeat the ready-made charges which are used against all philosophers about teaching things up in the clouds and under the earth and having no gods and making the worse appear the better cause. Of course, he's being accused of impiety. He's being accused of not believing in the gods of the city, which was a serious matter in the ancient world. Of either being an atheist or believing in different gods, it's all kind of vague, really. But also that he teaches about things up in the clouds and under the earth as if he knew what was in those regions, which of course they had no idea. And Socrates pretends to have no idea, or doesn't pretend to have any idea. But it's this last charge that I think is perhaps most interesting here from the former accusers, of making the worse appear the better cause. That's something to think about, to pause on, because it is quite important in terms of how Socrates relates to the rest of the community, and how philosophers in general perhaps have been thought of, making the worse appear the better cause. Remember what the kind of things that he does is he asks people questions about what they know, and he concludes that they don't really know what they claim to know. And one can, I think, naturally wonders how he knows that they don't know what they claim to know. Well, I think that is a good question, because of course Socrates claims really to know nothing, but he does know that he doesn't know, and he knows that they don't know either. So it would appear that he does know something. But this making the worse appear the better cause, I think, you have to sort of think about the kind of things that Socrates does. He asks people to give an account. He asks people to explain themselves. If he asks somebody what justice is, say a politician, or he asks somebody what beauty is, say a poet, first of all, those people would be presumed to know those kind of things. A politician should know what justice is because he has to administer it. A poet should know what beauty is because he's supposed to produce it. And what he finds is that they have opinions about these things, but those opinions do not stand up to scrutiny. And usually their opinions are just sort of the common opinion about these matters. For instance, in the Republic, Socrates asks several people what justice is, and the first answer he gets from a person of goodwill is that justice is helping your friends and harming your enemies. And Socrates thinks that's a terrible answer, and he tries to show all the bad things about it, all the contradictions, all of the confusions that are contained in that answer. But the people there find it very hard to give up that notion of what justice is, that justice is helping your friends and harming your enemies. It's a very strong idea in their minds, however strange it may appear to us. And so if Socrates can show by logic that that answer contains all sorts of problems, all sorts of contradictions, all sorts of weaknesses, it could be seen by some as him making the worse cause, his own, appear the better, making the worse argument appear the better, and making the better argument appear the worse. And oftentimes that happens in the dialogues where Socrates is able to show by pure reasoning, by logic alone, that there are difficulties in common opinions, but people are resistant to giving them up, which should be a familiar story in public life. People have prejudices which are endorsed by the community, which are enshrined by the community, and they seem to be resistant to reason. And I'm not going to mention any, but you can supply your own. It's actually quite an important part of Socrates' story, I think, this accusation that he makes the worse appear the better cause. Whenever somebody does that, I mean, in the sense that whenever somebody shows or questions or exposes to criticism popularly held beliefs which are shaky, I think that they get accused more or less of the same thing. And oftentimes, people don't like to be challenged. And people don't like to have to defend their opinions about things because it's hard. And especially if they can be shown that those opinions have deep problems and should probably be given up, people still. And again, I won't mention, there's no reason to mention any, but you can think of your own in terms of things that are popularly held to be true, which probably aren't. And just because people have a really hard time coming up with an account that could explain and defend those opinions, and how resistant people can be to changing, and how resentful they can be to somebody who challenges their cherished beliefs. Again, you can supply your own. So I thought that was an important thing to emphasize. When we move to the second set of accusations, the ones that he actually has to defend himself against in court, they're somewhat different. Here they are. That Socrates is a doer of evil and a corrupter of the youth, and he does not believe in the gods of the state, and has other new divinities of his own. Well, it's similar to the earlier charges, but not quite the same. There's the same sort of suggestion that he's either an atheist or some kind of heretic when it comes to religion. But perhaps the most interesting and important element of that is that he's a corrupter of the youth. And this is pretty much introduced by the last paragraph of the first section, when he refers to the young men of the richer classes who have not much to do. They like to hear the pretenders examine, and they often imitate me and examine others themselves. It gives you a clue as to Socrates' understanding of this charge that he corrupts the youth of Athens, that he corrupts the youth of the city. And that's because although Socrates was never wildly popular, he was generally regarded by the Athenians as being kind of an oddball. He did have his devotees. He did have his people who were devoted to him and who really spent time with him and saw the kind of thing that he was doing and began to do the same thing themselves. And that was to examine people, to ask them to give an account. And that's a very important aspect of the whole thing, to give what the Greeks called a logos, a rational account. Everybody has opinions, but not everybody can explain and defend those opinions. And that's what Socrates was asking people to do. And that's what people saw who watched him do it, that he was doing. All he was asking people to do was to give a rational defense of what they believed to be true. And it really is this that I think in Socrates' mind accounts for this charge of corrupting a youth of Athens. People, at least some people, are getting nervous that the kind of thing that Socrates does, asking people questions, about what they think they know is spreading, and they think it's a form of corruption. Again, a very interesting, a very interesting charge. It certainly relates to what I was talking about earlier about the accusation that he makes the worse appear the better cause. That is, that he is teaching a youth of Athens to question the communal beliefs, and that in the minds of his accusers, he's corrupting them in the same way that he's corrupted. And that corruption really is reason, right? Reason in the sense of holding yourself to a standard where your beliefs should have some evidence. Your beliefs should have some rational foundation. And if they don't, you should look for new and better beliefs. To a lot of people of a conservative bent, and we're all, in certain respects, conservatives in the sense that we want to preserve the wisdom that's been handed down to us by the ancestors. Challenging that wisdom, at least in certain respects, can be seen as a form of corruption. So it's quite an interesting charge, or all the charges are interesting. But yeah, I wanted to emphasize that, and we move through the second part, really, of the second major part of the speech, and that is his interrogation of Miletus. And read that for yourself. There's nothing really complex about it. He just tries to show that Miletus's charges are baseless and not made in good faith. Not made in good faith.